shout, it's fine. Nathan Roberts from Black Brothers, who I'm sure Caroline just forgot to mention earlier as an example of local good practice. I'm just kind of the strategy about having people care, getting people to engage with this agenda. I'm just a bit concerned about that because, you know, if we look at the A4E scandal last year that everybody seems to have forgotten immediately about in the work programme, if we look at the fact that of the tagging scandal, the fact that G4 has killed somebody, and that still hasn't stirred any public ire about involving private sector companies profiteering millions of pounds of taxpayers' money. So I'm just concerned about what can be done to actually get people to care. Because the devil with all of this stuff lies in a level of complexity that the average person just will not engage with. And I was talking to a friend the other day about the fact that the National Lottery, so the National Lottery, who was supposed to be distributing money for good causes, have actually put aside £40 million of lottery funding to incentivise councils to create social impact bonds. So people in lower socioeconomic groups buying a lottery ticket and thinking that some of that is going into a good causes, they're actually encouraging them to be packaged up as a liability to the taxpayer, as an investment vehicle to be sold on to the city, which Ian Duncan Smith has admitted he wants to do. Now the problem is, by now, I've probably lost some people in the room, let alone the average person on the street. So how can we get people to care about this agenda?
Well, thanks for that question, and it is a tough ask. But the world of communication is changing, as everybody knows. In a sense, the old ways are not always themselves fit for purpose. This is an old way. It's effective. But the old way of relying on people, relying on them to take care, to read, to listen, is a struggle. Hence the advent of social media, which I think is a big area for all opposition campaign groups to build on. But I take heart from some of the things that have been achieved. On the afternoon of the furore around the alleged overcharging on electronic tagging, Napa was able to get a press release out straight after Graham's speech. Now, we thought it would elicit some interest, but it absolutely went viral. We got lucky on that day, maybe, but within the space of an hour, we had just about every newspaper ringing up, every TV channel wanting people on the news and stuff. The share price of Serco and G4S dropped at about 6 to 7% respectively. And I was sitting in the Sky studio waiting to do the news, and that came up, and it kind of made my day. It shows what can be done. And this is my point about engaging politicians to say the right things. And it's not just about defeating the agenda, it's about scaremongering enough in advance to put the would-be bidders off their track. That's the thing. That's one of the things that hits them in their pocket. So it's about playing them at their own game and threatening their financial efficacy.
Let me quickly make up for not having mentioned the band of brothers very, very quickly, so I apologise for that, and they do some excellent work. But the serious point about how do we get people to care is the crucial one, really, because politicians aren't going to change unless they feel there's a weight of public pressure rising to put this higher up the agenda. And I think there is still an absence of knowledge that this is happening, and it's partly because it's been in the Lords, not the Commons, and that tends to get slightly less coverage. But I think we need to use all of the channels that are open to us, whether that's petitions on street corners on a Saturday in the Churchill Centre, or whether it's the social media, but also making links with some of the great campaigns that people who were opposing privatisation in the NHS ran. Because to some extent, even though, of course, issues around this are different, they're also, in ways that Paul was describing, actually quite the same, in the sense that it is about public services being put out to profit. It is about about things being up for sale, simply because of ideology, not because of evidence. And I think the more we can simplify some of these messages, because I think we can, and make common cause with some of those people that have already had a fantastic track record around this. I think we should be talking to, I'm sure you are, but things like 38 Degrees and the others who've got a weight of people they can swing in behind this. And the more we can make the links between this campaign and all of those other anti-privatisation campaigns, I think the more we can get a mass of weight to make government realise that they can't push this through sort of under the radar. It's not going to be under the radar, it's going to be very high on the radar. You've already done a lot of great work, but I think there's quite a lot more that we can do on that.
Yeah, my name is Phil Clark. I'm the secretary of the local trade union council, kind of the local organisation that brings union branches together. Sussex and Surrey NAPO, for instance, are affiliated. I mean, the kind of sad fact is that take away the basic detail, and that story is completely familiar. Do I need my?
Yes.
Yeah. Right. The story, take away the basic detail, the story that we've heard today is familiar to almost any public sector worker, and certainly any public sector trade unionist. You know, the government is using what was an enormous crisis of free market capitalism to tear up the welfare state and introduce a hell of a lot more free market capitalism. You know, basically trying to guarantee profits out of the public sector. Firstly, really, what I want to do is offer the local trades council support in terms of whatever campaigning is going on. If we need petitions sent round, if we need stuff go around the local labour movement, we can certainly do that. And we'll do our very best to support those things. I suppose just coming back on what you said just for a second, you know, obviously you've got to try and force the kind of the official opposition, if you can call them that, to do what you can. But I don't think really we're going to see a huge amount of what I think already exists, which is public opposition to privatisation, turn into real active opposition until there's a political lead. I'm of the opinion probably the trade unions need to ditch the Labour Party and start something different to get that to happen. But I digress from my main point. My main point really is coordination between trade unions, and because we've got a General Secretary and a President of National Unions here, I think it's worth asking, because we've got the CWU currently balloting the Communication Workers Union against privatisation of Royal Mail. There's ongoing battles in the NHS, in my own field, which is education, against privatisation. What we haven't got is coordination across all that, and that's what we need. When there is industrial action, and you know, across the public sector, there will have to be to defend jobs, services, and fight privatisation. The more that can be the coordinated, better. And I really want to know what our trade union leaders are doing to pull that together. Industrial action, yes, it's difficult, but unfortunately it's necessary. And not only is it a weapon we can use to fight privatisation, it actually it makes privatisation difficult in a lot of ways, because the stronger and more confident your workforce, the less private companies like Capital are interested. You know, the local bin depot, one of the reasons they've managed to not only get back into the private public sector but stay there is because no one wants to touch them, because they're so strong and so organised. And that, I think, is something we need to look at. So, you know, we are, across the trade union movement, going to be fighting privatisation, industrial action, but you know, where is the national coordination? Where is the one single message going out from the trade union saying, you know, this government is tearing up our public services for profit, and we, as the organised labour movement, are not going to stand for it anymore.
Looks like I've drawn short straw to answer this one first. I'm sure Ian will come in after me as well. I think that the coordination should come from the TUC, because that's where all the trade unions are affiliated to. It is the first starting point. As for coordinating industrial action, it doesn't help when you get unions spouting things that maybe they shouldn't, and putting unions against each other in a political way that's been done in the last couple of months. And I think that has harmed the trade union movement quite significantly. I think if there is going to be industrial action, I think the industrial action should be the last resort. As I said, members are already facing pay freezes. Many members can't afford to go out on strike, and it is the last resort for them. And strike action should always be the last resort in any form of action taken, in my view. There is other ways that we can hurt the employers. There is other ways that we can hurt the government, because ultimately our fight isn't with any of our employers at the moment. Our fight is with government. So it's very difficult at a local level to say to your members, we want you to come out on strike, but employer, we know it's not your fault, but it's the government's fault. and getting them out on strike. When fuel bills are going up, many of our public sector workers also work with their partners in a public sector as well. So it's a double whammy for many of them, and many of them can't afford to do that. So I think industrial action should always be the last resort. Coordinated industrial action should be through the TUC. That is the proper channel to do it. But unions coming together and working jointly, as we are with NAPO at the moment, on joint issues, I think shows a strength of feeling. It shows the members of those individual unions that they are willing to work together for a common goal. And, you know, what's happening in probation is impacting on police. It's impacting on police staff roles. It's impacting on CPS, so therefore it's impacting on PCS members. So it's bringing all those together and explaining to the public about what it means to them. It's getting the message out there, but getting the message out there at a local level and getting the public behind you. Without the public, our voices will not be as strong.
I endorse Maureen's sentiments entirely, but in answer to Comrade's question, I mentioned the Justice Forum when I spoke, and that is a gathering together of all those unions within the criminal justice sector who are looking seriously at coordinated industrial action at that appropriate time. In some cases, the PCS union, for example, already has a standing mandate for action for its members in the court service and elsewhere. So we are looking very strongly at that, because it is quite clear that if industrial action has to come, and I believe industrial action in one form or another will have to come, and that may not necessarily mean a series of rolling strikes. It could mean other action, short strike action, designed to make our case. If that happens, it is no good, is it? Unison members walking past NAPA or vice versa, because they don't have to coordinate their action on the same day. Total disaster, especially given the relatively low numbers. So that is a no-brainer, and you know that. But I would say this, that if the TUC, and Frances O'Grady made a very positive statement quite recently of the TUC's role in coordinating public sector's action, if she holds to her word, then I think we should build on that. And we have the TUC coming up, and there'll be opportunities there to test the mood and consult with colleagues. But yes, it's tough. Yes, it's a tough ask for members who, for the reasons Maureen talked about, are in a bad place. But that, of course, is what this government wants. It's about driving us down and not giving us the ability to fight back. The thing is, they underestimate us at their peril.
I want to read a short quote from tonight's Brighton Argus. I hope you can get the words. A prison service spokeswoman said, "Prisoners have no access to the internet other than for specific educational, employment or legal purposes. Even then, they are supervised by prison staff at all times and can only access pre-approved websites." Now, what's that got to do with this? Prison service is just a department, part of the Ministry of Justice. The people who come out with these statements, which are absolutely crass, I'll tell you why it's crass in a minute, have no sophistication. They do not understand how our services work at the front line. We know that. This is about a man from Brighton, who I suspect someone here may know, some of you may know, who's got his picture in the paper because in prison he's been photographed by Facebook. But the prison service say have no access to the internet. It's just rubbish. These are the people that organise CRAMS, Probis, Delius, all computer systems. the outsourcing of facilities management for probation services that have people driving 100 miles to change a light bulb. We've heard all the stories. This is before the tagging. Now, what I want to direct us to: how can we embarrass these people, the politicians, in the way that ultimately the Conservatives were embarrassed by the poll tax? I'm old enough to remember that. They were told it wouldn't work. It was obvious it wouldn't work. Anybody who knew anything about public administration knew it wouldn't work. It failed in Scotland. They introduced it in England. They had to massively resource from national taxation, local government. It failed. Margaret Thatcher eventually lost her job over it. Now, I honestly believe, and though I've been ridiculed by some, that this probation outsourcing can be Cameron's poll tax. I really, really do believe that. My MP, Priti Patel, who is I'm from Witham in Essex, who is one of Chris Grayling's trumpeters, the only way she's going to even think about this if she can be convinced that ultimately she and the others like her are going to look absolutely stupid, like they looked absolutely stupid over the poll tax, like they look absolutely stupid when they make statements like that, which are just nonsense. How can we expose their nonsense? Thank you.
How can we make Grayling look absolutely stupid? Well, he does that already.
No, but he's got to feel stupid. He's got to realise it's coming.
The sad thing is he seems immune to the absurdity of his own statements. And I guess another problem here, and this illustrates it, is that we know that the logic of this is absolutely flawed. We know the arguments against it are very clear and are unimpeachable. But when you've got somebody in power who is completely deaf to that argument, it's very difficult to make inroads and make change. And it needs some kind of political fallout to occur, I think, to make substantial change. Things like the electronic monitoring were good, because that helped change the debate. I was on TV and radio about 4 times in that couple of days, and each time I managed to finish by saying, actually, this is one example of a whole host of things, including the dismantling of the probation service. So it's about twisting the problems that occur, making the most of anything that comes up. I did the same over resettlement prisons, which again, a kernel of great idea, one that we've supported certainly since the mid-1970s, but almost impossible to bring to bear. We know that. So we have to take those opportunities, we have to be active in the media, we have to pick and turn them round. If we do that often enough and insistently enough, maybe, just maybe, people will start to listen.
I'm actually a student. I'm here because I'm concerned about privatisation of public services, so I'm not in probation here. But I think it's, I agree with the chap from the Band of Brothers. It's more about raising public awareness, because I think the people who are putting these things forward actually don't care, and they're not worried about what we think, and it's all undemocratic. I think it's just a case of making sure that people do take action, because, like you say, it is the time. And I agree with what you said about local communities, because the way that things are going, it's being destroyed, and we won't be able to take action because there won't be a union. I'm from Sussex Uni, and what they're doing at the moment is they're just bringing in lots of rich foreign students, and there won't be a community because people will just come and go, and nobody will know what's going on, and they're trying to bring in private companies to run everything, and it's an absolute mess. So yeah, I just basically think it's serious, and we should do something now, because pretty soon we won't be able to.
I just wanted to commend what the students have already done at Sussex University in terms of raising that issue, and it just, I think, reinforces the importance that I think is a theme throughout everything that people have been saying this evening, which is about the importance of working together. And the more we can link this issue, which I agree hasn't had the level of public awareness of many other privatisation scandals has yet, but the more we can link people together, it seems to me the only way we're going to make real progress is doing that. And I think students could be, wonderfully mobilised around this, as they have been around so many other issues as well.
We'll move quickly on to the next question.
Just want to make some commentaries. Paul, your observations about policy formation. I worked 32 years in probation and spent the last 4 years at NOMS in the Ministry of Justice. And a total eye-opener that how ideology drove everything. Evidence was taken out of documents if it didn't support the ideology. Huge amounts of fag packets were used. Things were made up overnight because the minister wanted it. Things were taken out. These proposals are very ill thought out. I know some of the people involved, and very few of them believe it. And the other thing that was really striking was how much of all ideas are driven by the procurement experts. It's not people with knowledge of the business are coming up with these ideas. It's the so-called procurement experts who are very much driving so much of the policy.
Yeah, if I'd say a couple of things on that, adding to that. As a researcher who does contract work for the MOJ, I'm continually faced with the problem of do I take the MOJ on and thus never get any research project again, or do I go along with some of their suggestions for change? And sometimes they're minor and you live with that, sometimes it's much more major. And you can see when you're doing research that the changes in policy and changes in government completely direct things, nothing to do with the efficacy of your research. So for instance, a piece of work that I was responsible for, which I shan't say the name of, was completed, was signed off, was ready to go before the general election. It then went into PERDA and it didn't move forward, nothing happened. 8 months after the election of the new government, we got a complete red pen criticism of this research, and they wanted to take out any reference to, for instance, regionalisation, which, because they were against it and they were abandoning it. And that was a completely policy-led change. And so it's part of my world, and it's very difficult to be in. The interesting thing about civil servants, of course, is that they seem totally willing, unless they leave, to accept a completely change of personality in delivering their job. So if you were working with the MOJ before the change of government, you were working locally, the civil servants would come out and tell you what policy was about, would tell you how to do local, would tell you how to do regional. After, those same people would come out and say, we can't tell you what you've got to do. You must do what you think is best. And it's very interesting. They're totally manipulated by the system. My concern about procurement, and I'm not in disagreement with Ian, I just want to come back to that. But my concern about that is the quality of procurement process that we have. And the electronic tagging is a perfect example of that, because we're going back to the 1980s, and somebody has procured something way over the cost value for a long time. But my real concern at the moment is, and this is my private understanding, is that there is a firm ready and waiting to take over the contract compliance for the MOJ, because the MOJ are not good enough at doing it themselves. And that will be another private company running their contract compliance. Because I think the MOJ realise they actually can't do it themselves and they can't do it effectively. So it's all over the place, this control. and you know, it's very difficult to get through that. But those are just the two points.
Okay, just conscious of the time, so I know some people have got to get trained, so I'm just going to ask you if you want to just finish us off in the evening, really, like 2 minutes to sum up and talk about where we might go next.
Well, as I said at the start, Chair, it's been an excellent turnout, and I think I'll go away really enthused from tonight as I go about my work tomorrow. And I mentioned in my blog on Napo News, so have a look at that, because it was a really interesting evening. And I hope to people that are not perhaps familiar with the probation service and what we do, you in turn will go back, talk to your family, your friends. You've got contacts on the leaflets, you know where to go to get further information. Because as speakers have said, it's about building that coalition of the willing, of fighting back, and not being prepared to be silenced because what we have to say is uncomfortable to the likes of Grayling and this government. And that's what this government is about. Driving you down, keeping you repressed, not allowing the arguments to come through. And what the campaign so far has shown, you're not prepared to sit back and take that. And I want you to take that message back to your friends, to your families, to your communities, to your organisations. And I think that's simple enough, Mike. We're there together, stand together. Thank you.
I just want to say thank you to everyone for coming out this evening. We really do appreciate you coming out and turning up, and especially, and I'd like to thank our 4 speakers for turning up. Some of them have come a very long way, and we really do appreciate it. Thank you.